Success! Oh, hi. Glad you're here. Glad to be with you. Today, this time, on this edition, we're at 1985, where I was 2 years old. And we only have a couple of films. Speaking of two, only two films to discuss today. The one honorable mention is the film Return of the Living Dead. I'm not big on the zombie genre in general. There's a couple of things I like, but as far as the genre as a whole, it's not something I'm normally attracted to. But you know, I like your Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead, your The Walking Dead to an extent, and what have you. But overall, Return of the Living Dead is by far my favorite zombie anything ever, and I absolutely love that movie, and it is so much fun to watch. The reason I have to mention it is, obviously I didn't see it in theaters. I never heard of it until I believe I was in high school. And my best friend at the time, we would hang out in his basement a lot, him, I, and our other friends. And one day we were all hanging out, and someone brought up, you ever seen Return of the Living Dead? You know, I got it right here. And I was like, no, I never heard of it. And they're like, what? You haven't heard of Return of the Living Dead? Oh my gosh, we gotta watch this. We did a lot of hardcore drinking in that basement. So it was, I guess it was my first experience with a group of friends gathering to make fun of a movie, to laugh at a movie, to watch a bad movie. At least at the time, that's how I saw it. In retrospect, having become more intelligent and understanding that movie a lot more now, I now know that that movie is a comedy. That movie is a parody of zombie films. Return of the Living Dead is never meant to be taken seriously, which is why I would not say it's a bad film. It's actually a brilliant parody. It's a brilliant comedy. It's a fantastic film overall. I mean, the practical effects alone, oh my gosh. So, it's not a bad movie, but I looked at it as a bad movie when I first saw it, and we were, taking care of business. We were laughing and hooting and hollering. We thought it was the most ridiculous thing we'd ever seen. Absolutely loved it. I love the mythology of how zombies the zombies are constantly in pain because they're dead, which is why they need brains, because brains is the only thing that makes the pain go away. Brilliant. I love it. Overall, the movie, it's quotable, it's fun, it's creative. Send more paramedics. And then the one with the no legs running around the torso zombie, like, it's a hilarious, hilarious movie. I even love the fact that Return of the Living Dead Part 2 is like almost an exact remake of the first one. I mean, I guess kind of like Evil Dead. Maybe that was what it was doing. It was parodying the fact that Evil Dead was a remake. So yeah, you had the same actors going through the same thing in Part 2 as Part 1. Don't get me started on Part 3. It's alright, but the original Return of the Living Dead, absolutely fantastic film. I had so much fun watching it with my friends that night that it just became this word of mouth thing that it spread. Oh, hey, and I would show anybody I came in contact with. So now I have it on DVD. I believe I've shown it to my son, and he had a good time with it once. And of course, we had to just skip that one part. But great film. It's a fun watch at any given time with anyone, under any circumstances, but even more so if you're under some sort of influence. So yeah, I wanted to acknowledge Return of the Living Dead for having such an impact on my life. For, hey, it's fun to get together with friends and watch even something ridiculous and joke at it. We'll discuss other films like that in future videos, obviously. I'm looking forward to seeing one of those on the big screen soon. But speaking of seeing something, okay, all right, so here we go. Boom. Honorable mention out of the way. Let's talk about the number one most influential film that was released. Biggest impact on my life. That was released in 1985. Return of the Living Dead came out in August. But in April of 1985, a little Richard Donner film came out, starring a very young Matthew Broderick, a very beautiful Michelle Pfeiffer, and a very kick-ass Rutger Hauer. Ladyhawke. Ladyhawke. Ladyhawke is a masterpiece. Ladyhawke, I saw as kids. I've mentioned. I don't think I have mentioned yet because those don't come till later. So I will mention. My two brothers and I, when we were kids, one of our neighbors had a VHS tape, or a friend of the family, something like that. They had a VHS tape that they recorded 3 movies onto, like off of HBO or something like that. And we got our hands on this tape one way or another, and one way or another, we kept that tape forever. I still have it somewhere. Had 3 movies on it, and to us as kids, it was our holy grail. I mean, this was before I became obsessed with Star Wars. This was before I became obsessed with the Alien saga. This was our original obsession was these 3 movies. And it was Willow, The Princess Bride, and Ladyhawke. Those are like the especially if you want to contain it to the 80s, but in general, if you ask me, those are the trifecta of the ultimate fantasy films. Medieval, sword fights, magic, romance. It doesn't get better than those 3 films. But Ladyhawke in particular was our true obsession. I remember at one point my brother had a castle Lego set that had just the same number of horses and knights that in one shot of Ladyhawke are coming out of the castle. So we were like, all right, this is a Ladyhawke set. We just loved that movie. And for me personally, it was my all-time favorite movie, period. And what I consider to be the greatest movie ever made, period, for most of my life, all the way up until about just over 10 years ago. And it's still in my top 3. Maybe 2. Maybe 4. It floats around depending on how you look at it, because there's some movies I consider to be my favorites that are more entertaining because they're bad movies. There's other movies that I consider to be more well-crafted. So I would say, overall, let's say Ladyhawke is still now in the top 3. And those other 2 movies have come out in the last 5-10 years. So for most of my life, Ladyhawke was the go-to film. When I would go on a date, or I'm not go on a date, but when I would get to know a girl that I had a crush on and we would hang out for the first time, that was my go-to. Hey, you want to watch Ladyhawke? Oh, you never heard of Ladyhawke? Let's watch Ladyhawke. And they'd be like, oh, okay, whatever. And then by the end, we're making out because it's the most romantic movie I've ever seen. If you ask me, Ladyhawke is the most romantic movie of all time. It's just a great love story. It's a fantasy. It's and the time period, like, it's one of the most immersive films. It still blows my mind to this day that it feels like they time traveled and filmed this movie back in medieval times. The settings, the cinematography, the acting, the costumes, everything about it feels very genuine, feels real, feels palpable. Palpable. Absolutely love it. Loved it as a kid, loved it as a teenager, loved it as an adult. Love it to this day. It was one of my all-time bucket list things. Like, I wish that one day I could watch that movie on the big screen. Luckily, I'm very fortunate in my current position in life. 1 week from today, I'm going to watch it on the big screen. Very much looking forward to that. But yeah, it's still just one of my all-time favorite. Matthew Broderick is amazing in it. Michelle Pfeiffer is amazing in it. Rutger Hauer is amazing in it. The guy, I don't know, his name escapes me, but the gentleman who plays the bishop is absolutely fantastic in it. You've got, what's his face? Dr. Octopus. Who was in the first Indiana Jones. He plays, he's in it. You've got, the Bishop was also with Matthew Broderick in a classic film called War Games. Overall, it's a romantic story. It's a story about a bishop who's jealous of of a knight and a beautiful woman's relationship, so he puts a curse on them. So the woman is always a hawk during the day, and the man is always a wolf during the night. So they're always together but eternally apart, never being able to touch in the flesh. It's great movie. Matthew Broderick plays a pickpocket who escapes from the dungeons of Aquila. There's so many quotable lines that I quote all the time. Great storms announce themselves with a simple breeze, and a single spark can ignite the fires of rebellion. If he's out there, Your Grace, I shall find him. Yes. Have you found Philippe Gaston? No, Your Grace. Then why are you here? I'm washed. I'm shaved. Do you expect to find him here? Then why are you in my god? Anyway, I'm getting all worked up because, yes, not unlike escaping mother's womb. God, what a memory. Like, from beginning to end, that movie is just, mwah, it's perfection. First movie I ever saw that was absolutely perfect, and still to this day retains its perfection. Some people will bring up, the cheesy music. It's not cheesy, it's 80s. Sure, there's electric guitar. Sure, it's mostly keyboard. But it's a brilliant score. I love Ladyhawke's soundtrack. It's absolutely phenomenal. Yeah, it's very 80s, but that's okay because it stands up. It's great. It fits the movie. It's such a fun adventure. I could go on for hours about why I love Ladyhawke so much, about how amazing it is, and the huge influence it had on my life. Huge. Clearly, it's still my go-to movie. I watch it on a regular basis. It's the perfect Valentine's Day movie, which is why I'm watching it next week on the big screen. It's just it's everything. It's just so much fun. It's brilliant. And get so we had it on VHS tape, which is how we mostly saw it. Some of you may know the quality of a VHS tape. And then one day, Ladyhawke was the first ever DVD that I owned. I say I, but my family, I ended up retaining the copy and mine forever because I appreciated it more than anyone. But I will never forget the day. It was the day we had a word processor when I was young, and then one day my parents were able to afford an upgrade to get this. You're not going to believe this. A personal computer. Yeah, a computer that we could put in our house and use for things like this thing called the internet, and we could get a subscription to this thing called America Online, and as long as we didn't pick up the phone when somebody was on it, we could go online and check these things called electronic mail, where you didn't have to wait for a postman. It just went via these wires. It was insane. But the day my parents showed up with our brand new personal computer, my dad was very excited. He said, "Get this. It can do all kinds of crazy things." But built into its what was called a disk drive, because we didn't have to use floppy disks anymore. We could use these laser disks that were like CDs. But built in to this fancy schmancy computer was a thing called a DVD player. You could play DVDs on the computer. That's right. We were only capable of playing DVDs on our computer long before we were available to afford a DVD player. So when he came home with this computer and was excited that it had a DVD player, he said, "I even got a DVD." And it was Ladyhawke. And we freaked out. I watched that thing nonstop on a computer. I could pause it. I could slow it down. I could rewind it. Oh, I was never able to pause a movie before without it having the VHS traction lines. It was amazing. And then, one day, this was the first DVD we ever owned, was Ladyhawke. And the first kind of VHS. But one day, I was able to snag it on Blu-ray. This was about 10 years ago, I'd say. And when did this release? Like the Blu-ray itself. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't really waste my time looking into that. But the point being, when I was finally able to get this on Blu-ray, I ordered it online. Much more convenient now. I'm very lucky to have grown up in the time I grew up. Those born in the early 80s, we've gotten to live through some pretty amazing things. Life was different when we were young, and it was way different when we were, in our teens and 20s, and now it's so much more even different. But anywho, I finally got my hands on the Blu-ray, and I watched it with my brothers. And it blew us away, no pun intended. Because sure, we had the VHS growing up, and then we had the DVD, ooh. But even compared to the DVD, which now looks like garbage, seeing it on Blu-ray was like seeing the movie for the first time. Because there's a lot of night scenes in Ladyhawke, and on the VHS, obviously, but even the DVD, they're very dark. Like, you can't see much. It's mostly little hints of this and that, and dialogue. But on the Blu-ray, they've got, like, I don't know how they upgraded this whatever they did, kudos to them, because it looks astonishing. You can see everything in the night scenes. So we felt like we were watching the movie for the first time. I love this so much, and I can't wait to see it on a giant screen in a week. So Ladyhawke, not only being the most influential film that came out in 1985, and changed my life forever, but is definitely by far one of the most influential films in my entire life. Only 1, 2, maybe 3 other movies, all 3 of which I first discovered in the last decade, have come close to having as strong of an impact on me as Ladyhawke. So Ladyhawke's the only film that impacted me this strongly for 30 years. The soundtrack I've listened to on a regular basis my entire life, to this day. The actors I'm a huge fan of. It's my favorite thing I've ever seen Michelle Pfeiffer do. It's my favorite thing I've ever seen Rutger Hauer do. It's my favorite thing I've ever seen Matthew Broderick do. Philippe Gaston, the pickpocket. And he picks the pocket of that one guy. After swearing to God, if he lets him live and escape from this prison, he'll never pick a pocket again. He'll never pick another pocket again. And then first thing he does is pick a pocket. And says, I know I promised, Lord, never again. But I also know that you know what a weak-willed person I am. And just for fun, like not even quoting, like it's just this thing my brain does every week to a month at least, is just recite this one scene, especially when it comes to toasting. Innkeeper, a drink of your most expensive. Yeah, show me your money. Copper, my friend. And the same to anyone who will join me in a toast. Let's hear your toast. I drink to a special man, my friend. A man who has been inside the dungeons of Aquila and lived to tell the tale. Then you drink to me, little man. I have seen those dungeons. A carpenter, perhaps? A blacksmith? A stonecutter, even? But a prisoner from inside Aquila? Music kicks in. Helmet reveal. I didn't say I was a prisoner. Oh, snap. If you had stuck to the woods, you may have stood a chance, Gaston. You're right. Kicking crazy music. Water! Psst. Action sequence! Oh, love that movie. Love that movie. One of my men told me you returned. I wanted to slit his throat for lying, but I knew you were that stupid. Isabeau. A day without a night without a day. Okay, here's what work out better than me just sitting here for 30 minutes going off about this movie. I think I've covered everything I need to cover. Go watch Ladyhawke. I don't know how, I don't know where it's available or if it's available, but if you can, watch it. It's fantastic. It's a Richard Donner film. Rest in peace. It's amazing. It's amazing. If you like medieval, if you like love stories, if you like curses, magic, evil bishops, Matthew Broderick, Michelle Pfeiffer, Rutger Hauer, if you like any of these things, you'll love Ladyhawke. I know I do. Okie dokie. You see, because the soundtrack combines keyboard and electric guitar with an orchestra and trumpets and horns and drums and trombones and French horns. I used to play the French horn. I don't tolerate people talking smack about the soundtrack just because it's very 80s and very like keyboard. It's great music, brilliantly written by someone. Doesn't matter. Go watch Ladyhawke. I already said okie dokie.